Family sent a Chinese widow to the rancher as a cruel joke, but she became his greatest treasure. The wagon wheels disappeared into the dust before I could draw breath to scream after them. She stood alone on frozen ground, a single trunk at her feet, staring at the weathered cabin that would be her prison. The February wind cut through her thin shawl like knives. Behind her, the valley stretched empty and merciless. Ahead, a man emerged from shadow, tall and worn, with hands scarred by labor and eyes that had forgotten how to trust. Her brother-in-law Wei's final words still burned in her ears. "You dishonored the family name. Let the white rancher deal with your shame now." Daniel studied her with the weariness of a man who'd learned to expect only trouble from the world. She lifted her chin, refusing to beg. They were two wounded animals assessing a threat. "I didn't ask for this," he said finally, his voice like gravel. "Neither did I." His jaw tightened. "Your family's playing some cruel joke I don't understand. But I won't be part of it." Mai's hands trembled, not from cold, but from a rage so fierce it threatened to split her open. They'd thrown her away like spoiled meat. Her husband's family, the people who should have sheltered her grief, had weaponized it instead. Daniel gestured toward the barn without looking at her directly. "Sleep there. I'll decide what to do with you by morning." She gathered what remained of her dignity, lifted her trunk, and walked toward the barn alone. The door groaned shut behind her. Inside, amidst the hay and darkness and the smell of horses, she arranged a sleeping space with shaking hands, then collapsed onto it. Through gaps in the wood, she could see Daniel standing motionless in his doorway, a silent sentinel watching her shadow. Mai clutched the small jade pendant her dead husband had given her, the only thing his family hadn't stripped from her. Her whisper was a vow to the empty air. "I will survive this winter. Then I will disappear where none of them can find me." She didn't cry. She had learned long ago that tears change nothing. The blizzard hit on the fourth day. Daniel found her collapsed against the barn door, her lips blue and consciousness fading. He cursed under his breath, short, sharp words swallowed by the howling wind. She had been too proud to knock, too stubborn to ask for help, even as hypothermia claimed her. He knew that kind of stubbornness. He'd worn it like armor for 6 years. Daniel carried her inside, laid her by the hearth, and forced hot broth between her lips. She resisted weakly, even half frozen, her pride nearly stronger than her survival instinct. Hours passed as the fire crackled and the wind screamed against the cabin walls. Mai's color slowly returned, from pale to pink, as death retreated. When her eyes finally focused, a war between shame and gratitude played out across her face. "Why help me?" Her voice was paper thin. Daniel tended the fire, not looking at her. "Winter doesn't care about our preferences." She pulled the blanket tighter, studying him. The cabin was spare, one room, functional and haunted by dust and a deliberate emptiness. It was a man's space where no softness had been allowed for a long time. "I won't be a burden," she said. "Then don't freeze to death in my barn again." He laid out terms like dealing cards. She would stay through the spring, help with chores, cooking, mending, preparing the garden plot. Come April, she could leave with his horse and enough supplies to reach a new town and start fresh, somewhere her family's shadow couldn't find her. Mai listened, calculating. This was not about trust, but necessity. "Your family won't take you back," Daniel added with brutal honesty, "but you'll have a chance somewhere else." "I accept." Good. That night, Mai slept on a bedroll near the hearth that Daniel provided without comment. The blizzard raged on, burying the world in white. Inside, two strangers breathed in the same small space, both wondering what survival would cost them. Neither acknowledged the relief of no longer being completely alone. The inciting incident crystallized in that silence: cooperation or death. Spring felt impossibly far away. Mai found the toy by accident 3 weeks later. Reaching for a pot in the back of a cupboard, her fingers brushed against a small wooden horse, carved with surprising delicacy. She held it carefully, transfixed by the detail of its tiny mane and legs mid-gallop, worn smooth by small hands. Daniel entered, saw what she held, and his face went to stone. A long silence fell, the air growing heavy with unspoken sorrow. "My sons," he said finally. A fever took him 5 years back. His mother, too. Mai's throat tightened. She returned the horse to its hiding place with reverence, as if it might shatter. When she spoke, her voice cracked. My husband, Shen, died in a railroad collapse 2 years ago. His family blamed me. I hadn't given them a grandson first. They said I brought a curse upon them. She looked at Daniel directly. They sent me here because they thought I'd already been through enough suffering. Cruelty dressed as righteousness. Daniel poured coffee with deliberate care and handed her a cup, the first gesture beyond mere necessity. And you took me in because you understand what it's like, Mai continued, to be buried alive by grief. He nodded once. They sat at the small table, both with hands wrapped around warm cups, both silent with the weight of acknowledged ghosts. This mutual revelation shifted everything. They couldn't unknow each other's humanity now. Outside, the first signs of thaw appeared as ice dripped from the eaves and the sun felt slightly warmer. Inside, something equally fragile began to melt. That night, Mai moved her bedroll slightly closer to the common space. Daniel noticed but said nothing. The barn door stayed closed now. An invisible line had been crossed. The wooden horse sat visible on the shelf, no longer hidden in shadow. Later, lying in darkness, Mai felt the cabin differently, not as a prison, not as temporary shelter, but as something else, something she didn't have words for yet. Across the room, Daniel stared at the ceiling, thinking the same dangerous thought, what if she stays? Neither slept well, both wondering what came after survival. Kneeling in the dirt, hands deep in soil that smelled of possibility, Mai realized with a shock that she was planting a garden, not just surviving, but building. April arrived with mud season and longer light. Birds returned to the valley, and the land wore patches of green like promises. Domestic rhythms formed between them. Mai mended and organized the neglected cabin, creating order from chaos. Daniel taught her to shoot his rifle. Wolves and worse, he said simply. She learned quickly, her hand steady on the weapon. Small kindnesses accumulated like interest. She left coffee hot for his dawn rounds. He brought wildflowers one morning, placing them awkwardly in a jar, muttering that the cabin needed life. One evening, a stubborn chicken escaped and led them on a breathless chase through the yard. They collapsed against the fence, laughing, actually laughing. The sound was startling in its rarity. For a moment, the weight lifted. Then they heard hoofbeats. Garrett, their nearest neighbor, arrived with supplies and judgment in his eyes. He nodded to Daniel and barely acknowledged Mai. Heard about your arrangement, Garrett said, unloading sacks. Town's talking. People have concerns. Daniel's expression hardened. People always have concerns about things that aren't their business. Just thought you should know. That brother-in-law of hers, Wei, has been in town speaking to folks. His family has standing with the merchants after Garrett left. The warmth evaporated like morning frost. Mai stood at the window. I'm poison to you, too. I should leave before I ruin your life here. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low but firm. I stopped caring what they think a long time ago. The question is, what do you want? She turned and met his eyes. I don't know anymore. That night, Mai watched Daniel repair fence posts under the moonlight, his silhouette patient and determined. She touched her reflection in the window glass, barely recognizing the woman staring back, stronger, more alive. But fear crept in. What if caring for him was the cruelest thing she could do? The thunder came like cannon fire, and Mai's scream tore Daniel from a half-sleep. It was not fear of the storm, but something deeper, darker. He found her curled tight, trapped in a memory, her eyes open but seeing another time. Rain hammered the roof as lightning illuminated her terror in stark flashes. Daniel hesitated, then sat beside her, his hand hovering before finally touching her shoulder. Mai, you're here. You're safe. She clung to him, trembling, and the words spilled out. The railroad collapse, her husband's screams echoing up from the earth, the unbearable weight, the silence that followed. 2 years hadn't dulled the edges. Daniel held her, uncertain but compelled. The fever took my family while I was away, he said quietly. Delivering cattle 3 towns over. I came home to fresh graves. Some nights, I still hear my boy calling for me or the storm passed. Dawn found them still talking, about guilt that never quite faded, about ghosts that demanded attention, about the terrifying prospect of loving again when loss had carved out so much. The physical closeness came naturally now, her head against his shoulder, his arm steady around her, not passion, but profound recognition. I feel like I'm betraying Shan by being happy here, I whispered. Does that fade? No, Daniel said honestly. But you learn to carry both the grief and the new joy. They can coexist if you let them. The morning light soften everything. They separated awkwardly, unsure how to name what was growing between them. Daniel tended the fire, and I made breakfast. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was charged with unspoken possibilities. That afternoon, working in the garden together, their hands brushed reaching for the same tool. Neither pulled away immediately. The connection was undeniable now, terrifying in its power. I felt her heart opening against her will, and the vulnerability was almost painful. Daniel felt the same, the fear of loving someone who could be ripped away, the exhausting calculation of whether joy was worth the risk of devastation. Neither voiced these thoughts, but both knew everything had changed in that storm-dark night. Mai saw the dust before the riders, and her blood turned to ice. She knew that silhouette, that posture of righteous fury. Wei dismounted with 2 hired men flanking him, his face carved from judgment and cold authority. The noon sun blazed overhead, harsh and exposing. You have shamed our ancestors further, Wei announced loud enough for his words to carry. Living as this white man's woman. The family has voted. You will return home and work our land under proper supervision. You owe us that much. Daniel stepped between them, his jaw set. She owes you nothing. She's free to choose her own life. She is family. You are nobody. A lonely rancher playing house with our dead brother's wife. Mai's voice shook but held firm. I choose to stay. You sent me here as punishment, to suffer and disappear. Daniel gave me back my life. I am not your property, Wei. I never was. Wei's face darkened with a barely contained rage. You think this rancher is going to protect you? He couldn't even protect his own family from God's judgment. Don't you dare, Mai stepped forward, fierce despite her fear. Use his dead child to justify your cruelty. The hired men shifted uncomfortably, this wasn't going as Wei had planned. You'll regret this, Wei said, his voice dropping to something more dangerous. Both of you. The town will make sure you're driven out. Or worse, I'll see to it personally. He mounted his horse with deliberate menace. This isn't over. The riders disappeared into dust, leaving only the echo of a threat. Mai collapsed, weeping, not from fear, but from the enormity of her choice. She had burned the bridge home forever. There was no going back now. Daniel held her and kissed her forehead for the first time, a gentle, deliberate act. We face it together. Whatever comes, but doubt gnawed at both of them as the sun beat down mercilessly. Had love just made them targets? Was choosing each other a death sentence in this unforgiving land? The brick came through the window at midnight with a note tied to it, sinners burn. 2 weeks of escalating harassment followed. The store owner refused them service. Church ladies crossed the street to avoid their shadows. Garrett stopped visiting entirely. Whispers followed them like flies. Daniel swept the broken glass with mechanical precision, his usual calm cracking. Maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe your family's right. You'd be safer away from me. Mai's fury ignited. I am not a burden you are keeping. I chose this. I chose you. Don't you dare take that choice away from me now. But privately, lying awake while Daniel boarded the broken window, she doubted. What if love wasn't enough against a hostile world? What if her presence destroyed him? That night, she secretly packed her bag. She would leave at dawn, disappear, and spare him further harm. It was the kindest thing she could do. But morning came, and she found Daniel already awake, repairing the window frame with patient determination. His hands worked steadily, with no complaint, no surrender, just quiet persistence. She understood then that running would destroy them both. Mai unpacked. They talked through breakfast, their voices low and serious. A plan formed between them, something that felt inevitable. They would ride to town together on Sunday, face the community openly at church, and claim their bond publicly. If we do this, Daniel said, there's no going back. It might get ugly. Good, Mai replied. I'm done hiding. They want us to feel shame. I won't give them that. Not anymore. Then we stand together. Let them see what a real partnership looks like. The days before Sunday felt like preparing for battle, not with weapons, but with resolve. Daniel practiced his words. Mai stitched a new dress, an armor of dignity. The night before, they held each other close in the darkness. No words were needed. The dark night of the soul had passed. They had chosen light together, whatever the cost. Every head turned when Daniel and Mai entered the church together, hand in hand. The silence was louder than any condemnation. They walked down the aisle through a gauntlet of stairs and whispers and sat in the back pew. Spring sunshine streamed through the windows, warm on their shoulders. Wei stood during the announcements, his voice carrying authority. This woman dishonors her dead husband and our family name. This man harbors her in sin. It is an affront to God and decency, and this congregation should address it. Daniel rose, his heart pounding but his voice steady. Mai's family sent her to me as a punishment, like discarding broken livestock. They wanted her to suffer and disappear. Instead, we built something honest, work, respect, partnership. She helped me live again after years of just surviving. If that's a sin, then condemn me. But she stays free. Mai stood beside him, trembling but clear. I loved my husband, Shen. He was good and kind, and his death broke me completely. But his family tried to bury me alive with their shame and judgment. Daniel gave me back my life, not as charity, but as an equal, building something new. I choose him. I choose the home we have made. The minister, old and weathered, spoke unexpectedly. Christ forgave the woman at the well. He told those without sin to cast the first stone. Who are we to deny second chances to broken people trying to heal? Some congregants stood and walked out in disgust, but others remained. Garrett's wife nodded slightly. The blacksmith stayed seated. A widow in the corner had tears in her eyes. Wei lunged at Daniel with a roar. They collided, brutal and desperate, a clash of fists and fury. The sheriff separated them forcibly. Enough. They're free adults on free land. This ends, Wei, or you answer to the law. Wei left with murder in his eyes, but legally impotent. Daniel and Mai exited into the bright sunlight, blooded but unbroken. A few people nodded respectfully. Most averted their eyes. They had claimed their right to exist together, publicly. The battle wasn't fully won, but they had stood their ground. Mai stood in the doorway of their home. She loved that word now, home. Watching Daniel mend the fence line, she marveled at how ours had become her favorite word. Late May had painted the land in extravagant green. The garden flourished with vegetables and flowers. 6 weeks had passed since the church confrontation. The town remained divided, but enough people accepted them that they could trade, live, and exist without constant threat. They had married quietly 2 weeks prior with Garrett's family and the minister as witnesses, not for validation, but as a true beginning. The child's wooden horse sat openly on the mantel now, surrounded by wildflowers. Mai refreshed weekly, honoring the past while building the future. The evening settled golden across the valley. Mai took Daniel's hand as he came inside and placed it gently on her belly. We're going to have a baby. His eyes filled with tears, fear and joy warring within them. I'm terrified, he whispered. So am I. But we'll do it together. We'll teach them that family is who you choose to love, not just who you share blood with. They stood together in the doorway at sunset, caught between the hearthfire behind them, a symbol of warmth, survival, and love made tangible, and the land ahead, stretching green and full of possibility. Daniel pulled her close. "You're my treasure, you know that? They meant it as cruelty, sending you here, but you became the greatest gift of my life." Mai smiled against his shoulder. "We saved each other. That's how real love works. Not one rescuing the other, but two broken people building something whole together." The sky painted itself in gold and pink as the sun dipped below the distant mountains. Behind them, the hearth fire crackled, constant and alive. Ahead, the garden stretched toward tomorrow, its soil rich with seeds and promise. The wooden horse caught the lamplight, a bridge between grief and hope. Mai thought of the woman who had arrived here 7 months ago, discarded and half dead inside, seeing only winter. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone who had learned the most radical truth: home isn't a place you're born into. It's something you build with love and choice and a stubborn faith in each other. Their story was just beginning.